What's up, bankers?
Hello, bankers.
How's everybody doing?
How are you doing? Are you okay on this break? We've got 3 weeks without Formula One. Week 1 is done. We're in week 2. And guess what? You might be starved, but today you're going to be fed. And you're going to be fed more than something you haven't had in a couple weeks. We're about to give you a full American, well, Canadian, honorary American, just a full North American hearty meal of our favorite F1 commentator who's been, taking a nice little paycheck over at the IndyCar, Fox at IndyCar, and having a good time over there with Will Buxton, the traitor. We've got the one and only James Hinchcliffe on the pod.
Hey boys, just for clarity, who am I trading on? Which one am I?
No. Will Buxton is a traitor.
Oh, he's
You're
the traitor.
Not.
Yes. No, big time. Huge, just incredible what he pulled there. Just so rude.
It was a big Casa Amor switch.
Yeah. It does feel like Will Buxton's in Casa Amor over at IndyCar, but he's bringing that British flair, he's bringing that Buxton excitement to the IndyCar streets. So we're going to we want to talk about a lot with you today. We want to talk about F1 because we haven't seen you. You were just on the most recent broadcast, and we were thrilled to see you there. But the people have been starved of the James Hinchcliffe commentary, so we want to chat with you about F1. We want to talk about IndyCar. We want to talk about Alex Palou and this historic run that he's on. But how has it been? Do you feel caught up, or do you feel like you're catching up with F1 because your attention's been elsewhere?
Dude, it's literally my week is catching up with F1. If we have an IndyCar race, which the schedule the way it is, we've had a lot of them in a short period of time. Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays are just like binging everything F1, trying to make sure that I am up to speed. So that way, when they just like drop me in Hungary mid-season, I kind of feel like I know what's going on. And I got to tell you, man, that series, they produce a lot of information, a lot of drama, a lot of stuff going on.
There's a team accelerating. There's a team, obviously, in McLaren, but there's, this toss-up between Oscar and Lando. It feels like it's,
to be 15 races in, whatever we are now, 14, I guess. And there's one win between them, right? Like it looked like maybe, okay, Lando was the guy going in, and then Oscar had this amazing run, and then Lando's come back, and like the ebb and flow of who's kind of been in charge at that team from a pace standpoint at different phases, it looked like it was going to kind of run away one direction, right? Even though it was going to be only 8 points at a time, or, whatever it is between first and second. And, then also you had that issue in Montreal, and so it's like, okay, now it's really on Oscar's side. He didn't score any points. Lando didn't score any points. Oscar's finishing ahead. He's winning races. And then Lando bounced back in a huge way and has continued to. So to be, 14 races in and have one race between it is pretty awesome. The hope is that we don't have one guy come back from the summer break and just walk the last 10, right? Or 9 of the last 10. I hope it goes, shot for shot over the last bit of the season, and we have like a real awesome battle that goes down to the last race.
Have your opinions on either of those guys changed as the year's gone on? Like, did you think that Lando was going to come in and be the guy, and then, oh no, and now maybe a little bit, like, where did they both sit in your mind going into the year, and where do they sit now?
It's a great question. So I think when you look at the growth that Oscar had from year 1 to year 2, that if he took the same step from year 2 to year 3, you'd be like, okay, this guy's going to be a for real issue for Lando. And so going into the season, that was kind of like, is he gonna continue that trajectory, right? That progression. It was answered pretty quickly that yes, he was. So that one was kind of less of a surprise, but it's just like no less impressive that he's pulling off what he's doing. Because there were obvious weaknesses in his game a year ago, and he obviously spent the offseason really focused on that, honed in on that, and I think has done an incredible job filling in those holes and making himself a genuine contender. On the Lando side, everybody loves talking about his mental strength. Is he strong enough to do this? What I've sort of learned, what I think I've learned about him, and just kind of watching how this all has unfolded over the last, 6 months, is the issues that Lando has, I think, are so much more with internal pressure than external pressure. So when people start talking about, oh, he's making all these mistakes, he can't take the pressure, I think it's when he's just exclusively putting pressure on himself, because the mistakes are coming in like qualifying. He'll botch a lap, and that's when he's putting the pressure on himself. It's not even that he's trying to beat Oscar as much as he is trying to get 100% out of himself, which is what you have to do when you obviously can't afford to make those mistakes. But what's been really impressive about Lando is he's had a few races where he's had incredible pressure in the car from somebody else, and he has not faltered, right? You think about that first stint, the first stint of the season in Australia in the wet. He had the lead, but Piastri was absolutely hounding him in some of the most difficult conditions you could have possibly imagined, and he didn't make a mistake. At least he made the same mistake that Oscar did. It worked out worse for Oscar, but like he withstood the pressure. Then you go all the way to this most recent race, right? You had Oscar catching him, massive tire advantage, the last 10 laps. He had to be picture perfect, and he did not falter. And there's a bunch of examples in between. So when people talk about, Lando's mental strength, I think there's some things that he can clean up when he's putting pressure on himself. But what's really impressive and what's arguably harder to get better at as a driver is dealing with that pressure on the racetrack inside the race car. And he's doing that really well. So if he can keep putting himself in the position to be in front, I think he's going to be really hard to beat.
I think there's a misconception when you talk about mental strength. It's something I was thinking about the other day when I was on a guy's trip and we were playing mini golf, and I was like up big, and I was like, wow, I could actually win this thing. And then I just like completely collapsed, and I finished, you know what I mean? Just mini golf. Like once it got in my head that I was going to win, and the stakes were like, I had to wear like some terrible t-shirt, but like, I think this idea that like, I think he's mentally weak is like maybe the wrong term. It's like, it's all relative. Like all these guys to get where they are in the 99th percentile. It's just like
100%.
Where we're seeing the difference is like maybe in the margins, these little things, it's like these marginal things, like the starts, slightly misjudging things like by a millimeter. I guess my question is I have a two-part question. Are we reading too much into like, because all we can do is like sort of judge like what we see on track, which are these little errors, and also the reading the tea leaves of like his sort of what he does in the press conferences and what he says to the media, where maybe you're picking up on that self-critical sort of stuff, because you see Lewis, he says he's useless, and that's sort of maybe viewed differently because he's won like 1 million championships. And it's like, well, that's part of his process, maybe. But when Lando does it, he's less proven. You're like, well, is he too critical of himself? That's part A. And B, like, as a driver, how do you like, I guess like how do you work on these mental things? Like, what is your process to get better at them?
That's a great question. It's a great question. So I'll start off the first part. I think that people are different. I think everybody's different. And I think everybody has to, when you're trying to operate at that 99.9%, at all times in your profession, you have to be very self-aware and you have to understand how to get the best out of you. There is this kind of belief that you have to be a little more like an Oscar Piastri or a Max Verstappen, where you're kind of cold, calculated, kind of unemotional, even though you hear Max kind of get revved up in the race car, and then you sometimes see it in his driving. Frankly, when you hear Max get revved up, as often when you see the small mistakes that he occasionally makes, Oscar lives here, right? Like, I'm sure he's a great guy out of the car, but he's been absolutely dynamite at keeping himself just so centered in the car. And that's what works for Oscar. I actually give Lando a lot of credit for all this, like, the self-bashing that he does in the media, because I think that he's figured out that's actually what works for him, because it's owning it before someone else can own you with it, right? If he makes a mistake, 99% of the time drivers are like, not my fault, right? There's the driver handbook of excuses. It's 1,000 pages, right? But Lando gets out of the car and he's like, yeah, I screwed that up. And then if someone else says it in the media, it has less impact because he's already owned it. And for him,
it's the Eminem approach in 8 Mile. We've talked about this before.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's like no one can criticize me better than I can criticize me. And the difference is, look, every driver actually goes home at night, closes their door, lays in bed, and knows exactly what they did wrong. 99% of them will not say that publicly, right? They'll try to figure it out, but they'll put on the brave face in the media. Lando's kind of figured out that for him, it's better to just get it out and not take it home with him and not let someone else say it in the media and perpetuate a story. And credit to him. I actually give him a lot of credit for understanding that he doesn't have to just fill this, template that has been kind of written by the Max Verstappens and the Oscar Piastris of the current generation.
As Lena Dunham once said, that is because no one can ever hate me as much as I hate myself, okay? So any mean thing someone's going to think of to say about me, I've already said it to me, about me, probably within the last half hour.
It's the same line of thinking.
He's given Hannah Horvath.
But
I digress.
But I guess but does it help sometimes to repress these things?
For some people,
shut them out because, but he does have problems with the starts, and to be like, I fucked up the start. Like, does it? And everyone's like, well, it works for him, and I'm like, well, sometimes it works for him. Sometimes I see him blow starts or make little mistakes. So it's like, I guess the question is, it's worked for him to the point that he's like one of the best drivers in the world. But like, in order to get to that, like, there's I think it was David Coulthard that told that great story about Michael Schumacher, right? Where it's like they got in an argument and Michael Schumacher was like not giving in to something that he was clearly wrong about, and he's like, and David Coulthard said, "Okay, I'll concede that you might that you're right this time, but do you think you've ever been wrong once in your life?" And he was like, "No." Like, just 100% self-belief, never been wrong, never been mistaken. Like, with Villeneuve, even when he crashed into Villeneuve, like, he actually didn't think that was his fault,
Right.
Like, that's just, and you'll say, well, that worked for him. And I'm like, yeah, it worked for him. Like, and he won 7 like, there's levels to what works for you, I guess.
Yeah. I like to bring it back to Senna, because he was an incredibly emotional guy, right? And wore his heart on his sleeve and, spoke in the media very openly about things that maybe other people wouldn't. Worked for him. And then you kind of had on the other side of the garage, it's very, very reminiscent of what McLaren's dealing with today. On the other side of the garage, you got a guy that's a lot more buttoned up, a lot less likely to say something in the media, a little more precise and kind of more the professor sort of vibe, right? So it's, again, I think it really is just, people are unique, and there are certainly traits that are common among all of the great drivers or great athletes, right? That killer instinct, that crazy self-confidence, you kind of have to have that stuff. But, and I think Lando's confident in his ability to drive a race car, and the way he approaches dealing with this stuff. And again, to kind of go back to the second part of your former question, how do you get better at that? Well, a lot of these guys do work with sports psychologists, with mental coaches, because there are tricks, there are exercises that you can do to kind of put yourself as close as possible. Obviously, it's so hard to replicate what you do in a race car from a mental standpoint, from a pressure standpoint. But there are techniques that you can develop to kind of help you cope with those things, and a lot of those guys are doing that.
Did you ever work with a driver coach?
I did, and it was a huge help.
What was your favorite exercise?
What kind of stuff
would you
do?
Now?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so a good one. The one that I found really helpful was, I used to get kind of angry in the car. And when I got angry, I didn't drive better. So so there are some drivers that you need to hype them up before a race, right? Like, the best way to get the best out of certain drivers is slap him in the face, kick him in the nuts, and tell him his dog just got run over by a car in the parking lot. And then he'll get in, he'll drive angry, and he'll be unstoppable, right?
Right.
I established that was not me, right? I was the opposite. I drove best when I was calm, when I was relaxed, cracking jokes with the crew as I'm getting belted in the car. That was where I could reach my sort of apex, focus and ability. So when I would get angry in the car, I would regress, and lap time would fall away, and it would all just go, south. So I would work on he would give me these exercises to kind of help compartmentalize that emotion, right? So in that case, it was like anything that somebody did to you. It was usually like driver on driver, right? If somebody cut you off or brake checked you or did that, whatever.
Right.
His whole thing was, it's done. It happened. It can't unhappen. Why are you worried about it? And I'm like, well, but no, but that's not how it works. It's done. You can't change it. So why are you wasting any energy on something you can't change? And so he would tell me to like find moments in my everyday life where something bothered me and then really work on just clicking your fingers and letting it go. And sometimes there was like a phrase you would say to just remind you like, oh, that's one of these moments. And then you cycle back in. So, a guy cuts me off on the road or like, is riding your bumper down the highway and you want to, flip him off and feed him a wheel or whatever. And you just have to like have that moment, say that word and just, it's done. Can't change it. So for me, that was a huge help. It's just learning how to like take these little things and just letting them immediately disappear.
Right. It seems like you kind of have to have goldfish brain
absolutely.
in this game a little bit. And you say that stuff and I want to go immediately into like therapy mode where I'm like, so why do you think that you needed to like get your payback, James? What in your childhood made you feel like when someone wrongs you, you have to write it in order for the situation? But you can share or not share your own description.
I'm a sucker for justice. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's interesting, the classic dichotomy that's discussed with these two drivers is like Lando's the guy with the ultimate pace, right?
Right.
And then Oscar is the guy that's got the racecraft, the tactician, the Prost, right? And I guess the question is, I guess I could kind of see how you work on your racecraft on lap times. That's in the simulator. You look at the lap traces and you say, okay, maybe I go a little faster around here. Maybe I could brake later here, smoother on the pedal, whatever it is that you drivers do to get faster, I guess. But I guess my question is more for like the Lando side of things, which is like, in football, you have a chalkboard, you go through X's and O's, like this is how we're going to run this play. Like what can Lando do if let's say for a second, you even agree with it, that his racecraft leaves something to be desired. What does a driver do to get better at the wheel to wheel, starting a race, defending, that sort of shit? Because you could get on a simulator and practice your lap times, but like the sort of wheel-to-wheel battle, dogfight, so to speak, that's a little bit harder to work on, no?
1,000%. It's almost impossible. It's you kind of have to learn by doing. And so if you identify an area where you want to get better, the kind of two things you'll do is you'll look back at you watch tape like every athlete in every sport, right? So go look at examples of drivers that did something particularly well in a given situation. Like, why is Oscar being called a better racer? Like, what examples are there? And look at what he did in certain situations, things like that. And then ultimately, man, you've just got to go out and do it. And you've got to be willing to get it wrong a couple times in order to improve, because the only time you have to practice that is in a race when it matters. And so if you're not willing to push your own limits and push your own boundaries, you're not going to ever find what that limit is when it comes to that sort of thing. So it's a harder thing, if you agree that Lando's racecraft needs work. And I would say that Oscar's had some really good examples of spectacular overtaking, and you could maybe give him a point more than Lando on overtakes specifically. But again, you look at Lando's racecraft in Hungary, right? Managing the tires beautifully, dealing with that pressure in the last 10 laps. It's hard to argue that like pure racecraft as in totality is lacking in that respect. So and I'm not even sure you can argue that Lando's quicker over lap. I think when Oscar has a car that he loves and he nails it, he's just as fast. Like, those guys are so evenly matched, which is why we're 14 races into a championship and there's one win between them.
Part of the discussion is also a little bit around Oscar's kind of ascent, for the first year to the second, now in his third, now he's challenging for a championship. I guess, it's interesting. Matt is more on is rooting for Oscar this year. I'm rooting for Lando. We're on either sides of this thing with regards to kind of like what we're kind of going into each week with. I guess if Lando does pull off this championship, a knock could potentially be, well, Oscar's only in his third year. He's not really at peak yet. I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are on, because, Lando's been in the game longer, right? He should be kind of like at his peak. This should be like prime Lando years. Do you think Oscar Piastri's in prime Oscar years, or how much higher do you think his ceiling is than he is right now?
It's a great point, man, because again, you looked at that progression from year 1 to year 2, and then progression from year 2 to year 3. And if he can find another jump in year 4, it's going to be really tough to beat him. There's a chance he just reached his plateau sooner, and he is where he is, and him and Lando will forever be, at that kind of similar level, maybe achieving it in slightly different ways, but operating at a similar level. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I would have told you last year that Alex Palou was probably already at peak Alex Palou, and then he showed up this year and was better in every conceivable way. So it's possible that he could still have a jump. Addressing the fact that he got there quicker than Lando, I think there's kind of 2 points to consider that are sort of one overall point. But when Lando got to that team, they weren't very good. They were not a very good team. Over the course of Lando's first 3 years, there was a lot of personnel shifts. There's a lot of car development. And then, over the last 2, they've had a really competitive car. Oscar kind of came in. I know they were absolutely terrible for the first half of Oscar's rookie season. But as the car got better, the team got stronger. Like he's gotten to kind of do his learning at the front in a much different environment than what Lando did. And what would be interesting is if that car all of a sudden sucked, right? Would the gap actually grow in Lando's favor because of that experience? Because when you look at the other rookies on the grid this year, I know those 2 aren't rookies, but when you look at all the rookie battles on the grid this year, every single one of them have had moments of absolute brilliance, and every single one of them have had moments where their more experienced teammates just wiped the floor with them. And if you go and actually plot it out, there's a pretty good correlation between when that particular car was really good or like in a better place versus when they were really struggling. Like when the Sauber started finding a little bit of pace, Bortoletto's out qualifying Hülkenberg. When the Haas was pretty good, Behrman's right up there. As soon the Racing Bulls has always been good, and so Hadjar is just kind of always in the top 10, right? He's just never really had that team really hasn't had a development swing. They've been kind of at that same pace. But when the other teams start losing pace, Ocon has the edge on Behrman. Hülkenberg has the edge on Bortoletto. George has the edge on Kimi. I mean, Kimi started the season banging, and then as the Mercedes relative pace has struggled, the more seasoned driver seems to be stepping up a little bit more. And there's enough examples in this season there's enough data points there that makes me think there is a trend. If the car's good, a talented driver can get it to go fast. But when it's not great, that's when the experience really stands out.
But can't you also cut it the other way? Like, there's nothing harder than being in a fight for the championship?
Mentally, yes. In terms of car performance, lap time, no. I think when the car's good drivers will drive it fast and be within a close margin. It's when the car's tough to drive. That's when you see the separation in pure performance.
Vegas, this episode is brought to you by our friends at BetMGM. This season is heating up. Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris. You might not think that it's fun, but I certainly do. And this thing is neck and neck. And right now, Oscar Piastri minus 165 to win the championship. Lando Norris plus 120. Lando's the underdog. Baby, I'm putting money on Lando Norris to win this championship. He's down just a few points, and we got 10 races to go. I think he's going to be able to pull it off, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and put my money on number 4, Lando Norris, to take this thing. And if you have not been betting on BetMGM, then you got to get in there. So you got to come see what's new at BetMGM. You can score bigger when you win with boost tokens, odd boost tokens, and more, even if your bet doesn't hit. You put money on Lando Norris and he doesn't win the championship, don't worry. they've got you covered with no sweat tokens. Sign up at BetMGM today and you'll have access to countless betting options, including new look, same-game parlays, teasers, live bets, and so much more. Take advantage of these offerings and be sure to use the bonus code DADDY, because we're fun, when signing up to receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. So you can bet on Lando Norris to win the championship, or to win in Zandvoort, or Oscar Piastri, or whoever you think is going to win or be on the podium. You can bet that, and then if it doesn't hit, if you sign up with our bonus code DADDY, you can get up to $1,500 in bonus bet if that bet loses. We'll see you out there, Venkas.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 for New York. Call 1-800-327-5050 for Massachusetts. 21 and over only. Please gamble responsibly. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP for Arizona. 1-800-BETS-OFF for Iowa. 1-800-981-0023 for Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Bonus bets are non-withdrawable. In partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. See BetMGM.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico.
I have a dumb hypothetical that's slightly off topic.
Love it.
Do you think Carlos Sainz is sitting at Williams right now being like, I should have never left McLaren?
Yeah, man. I mean, he kind of got done dirty. You know, that's it's a tough thing to think about, right?
He could be fighting Lando for a title right now.
He could be fighting Lando for a title. You know, if Daniel Rick could have survived one more year, maybe in a good car, he came back to, you know, previous form. I look at it the other way. I look at what if Oscar hadn't got out of his Alpine deal. Could you imagine that? Because you're imagining a scenario where a guy who's not having success is like, oh, that could have been me. How about a guy that's actually raking it in, looking at Gasly, being like, oh, man, that was nearly me.
Just a big French punch.
Oh, thank God those guys didn't know how to fill out a document in the contract review board or whatever stupid technicality it was. Like Oscar Piastri and Mark Webber, genius. Well done.
But it was also a ballsy move, because it's like, oh my God, did you just see what happened to Daniel Ricciardo? You want to be next? You want your career to be over? Like the balls on that kid? Just be like,
first 6-8 races of that year, the car was terrible. In testing, the brakes were catching on fire. They couldn't even like drive the thing. Like it must have looked really bad for a minute there. But they saw the vision and it all came good.
Okay, I'm going to post another hypothetical for you. Let's say you can have 3 cars on the grid, and Alex Palou stays at McLaren IndyCar, wins the championship in the maybe slightly lesser IndyCar outfit, goes to F1. We have these 3 McLaren cars going after it this year. How does Palou stack up against these boys?
Dude, he's right there. He's right there.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. You've got this car that's performing so well. And so you've got 2 drivers that are capable of exploiting it, and they're right there. Another good driver. He's not going to stand out above them like in a massive way, but I think he can be right. This car has a limit, and because it's a I don't want to say it's a forgiving car to drive, because both guys will tell you when it's outside its window, it'll, you know, it's as gnarly as the rest of them, but its window is big enough and that performance window is high enough that when a good guy gets in it, they're going to push it to that limit. Palou's right at that level. I mean, you would have a 3-way fight for the championship, and it would be incredible.
What do you think the learning curve would be like for someone like Palou?
It would be, there would be a learning curve for sure. It would be a year. Like you would need a year to go through everything. The biggest thing in F1 compared to say IndyCar is tires. Like tire management is the name of the game, right? And that's what Lando took a huge step on like 2 or 3 years ago. Oscar's made that big step from last year to this year. Like those are the big keys. And when you're racing your teammate, like that's going to be the difference maker, because again, they're both so fast over a lap, but it's, you know, making these Pirellis last and knowing exactly how hard to push and when. That's the kind of, you know, the black magic, the real art form of F1 right now.
But is there no carryover with the black magic it takes to fuel save and find time in IndyCar?
For sure.
Like, you don't think Scott Dixon could none of that black magic that he has with fuel saving would carry over to tire saving, or it's a completely different ball of wax?
It's not completely different. There's definitely some carryover, but again, the margins you're looking for are this, right? So if 95% of it carries over, you're still 5% off the best in the world, and that's enough to lose. So it's finding that last little, like last year, Oscar's tire management was better than 99.9% of people on the planet, but it wasn't as good as the guys that had done it a little bit longer. So that extra year of experience, he's now risen to that same point, and then now I'll understand it better.
What has you mentioned Palou, making that jump from last year to this year? What do you think, like, where have the margins increased for him? Where has he gotten better from last year to this one?
So his qualifying pace has gotten decidedly better. He was always good in qualifying, but now he's better. And when you and the other thing, and like you kind of mentioned it earlier, and I didn't touch on it enough, to be fair, his team is also operating at an insane level right now. That car is usually pretty solid right off the truck on a Friday. From a strategy standpoint, those guys almost never miss. I can think of one, you could call it a mistake, but it was like a judgment call 50-50 thing, and it just didn't go the right way. Other than that, they've been absolutely bang on this year. Pit stops are incredible. Like, team is absolute. Could he win 8 races with any other team? Hard pass. Absolutely not. No chance. So it's important to kind of recognize that side of it.
I also seem to remember that he won on, they said he couldn't win on ovals, and he won on a big one. I can't remember.
He did. Yeah. He won this little race in Indiana.
That he won on?
Yeah. I think it's called, yes. That's
how many miles is it?
4 to 5, I think 500.
Carry the 500. Indianapolis 500, I think he won. Yeah, that's right.
He did win that one.
So what do you think? Because everyone was saying, oh, he's a road course merchant. Like, and what do you think he had to dial in to figure out how to win something like that?
What's so funny is he hadn't won on an oval yet, but he had come like up second, third, fourth, quite a bit. To say that he wasn't like good on ovals was completely misleading and incorrect. To say he hadn't won on an oval, fine, totally fair. He hadn't. But, he had second place. I mean, he had that incredible second place at the 500 his first year with Ganassi. He was in the fight for the win in, I think, 23 and got hosed by a pit lane thing. Or got taken out in pit lane or something like that.
Yeah, we were at that one. That's where he got into a collision in the pit lane. Yeah,
right, and then drove from last to fourth. Yeah, it was Renus.
Right.
Yeah.
But then went to back and drove up to fourth. In half with 100. In only 100 laps. So it's not that he wasn't good. He just hadn't had that day yet, and he had that day in Indy this year. It always takes a little bit of luck. There's always good cars, and, his win in Iowa is probably the one you could circle on the calendar this year. So he had his first oval win, backed it up on a short track in Iowa. But you could argue that one was as much luck as it was skill, because Newgarden was the dominant car and kept getting hosed by yellow flags and going a lap down and then getting it back and running up to the front again. And he got kind of buried. So he was the second best guy that day, but he won the race. And that's part of what's been so impressive about their season is a lot of the times they are genuinely fast and the fastest guy and can win. But on days when they don't have the fastest car, they still manage to pull out the odd win, which is really hard to do in this series.
Well, I'm curious, what's the social dynamic over at IndyCar with Alex on this kind of like run of dominance? Like, do people hate him? Like, where is Pato O'Ward? Where's Joseph Newgarden? Is Will Power like, this fucker is coming for my records? Like, has he? Sometimes the top is a lonely place to be. Is he finding that, or do people still like Alex Palou in the paddock?
So here's the problem: is he is like also the nicest dude. He's just like such a sweet guy, and he's a great dad and a good husband and just polite, and he's just a good person.
Makes it worse.
Oh, it's so much worse. You want to hate him, but you just can't.
Yeah,
but I will say I noticed at Laguna 2 races ago he won the race again, and it was Herta and Lundgaard were on the podium with him. And, they call up third place, he stands there. They call up second place, he stands there. They call up first place. And it's like, it's etiquette. You go and you shake the hands of the other guys, right? For the first time, like, it wasn't just that they didn't like smile and pat him on the back as he went to go shake their hands. It was like a stone cold, just like they're really getting sick of getting beat by the same guy. Like, it's bad. You want to win, right? Every driver wants to win. You hate losing. But when it's consistently to the same guy, it's just so easy to point to like, well, what's he doing better, right? If it's if it's 10 different guys winning races, it's like, oh, well, he had a good day, or he got a lucky break, or he did this well today. But like Palou's just winning all of them all the time at, everywhere, everything all at once. And it's a lot harder to kind of stomach that.
Well, it's kind of comforting in IndyCar where, today was it, because not to shit on IndyCar, but there's something, it almost sometimes feels, to an outsider, it seems random. It's like, oh, fuck, he won today? Like, anybody could win on any, and that's what's fun about it. Anybody could win on any given day, but it's like, my day will come eventually, but like when he wins every day,
right?
It's sort of
he's taking all those. He's taking away all those. That could have been my day, even on like a lucky break. Yeah.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
So I guess one of the things when you look at a driver like I mean, sticking with Oscar and Lando, like it's a little bit harder for us to look at it as outsiders. But when you're evaluating these different top drivers, whether it's Lando, let's leave Max to the side for a second, because I think it's kind of agreed that he's the best. I don't think most rational people will say he's the best, and he's probably the best at most things, or top at most things. But like when we're getting, it starts to get hairy when we move down a level. Who knows where Lewis is at this point in his career? But let's just talk about like Lando, Oscar, George, Charles. You look at those four guys, right? Now, when you look at like a basketball player, you go, okay, how does he shoot? How does he dribble? How tall is he? How good is he on defense? Can he switch? Like these are all things that like sort of you put him through. Can he pass? Right? Can he rebound? Like you put them all through the blender. And like that's why LeBron was the best of his generation, right? Because he could do all these things at like a 9.8 out of 10, right? Or 10, right. 9.9 out of 10. Is because he had all the tools. Now, I guess when you're looking at like trying to figure out where this next tranche of drivers stacks up, like what are you looking at and where do you put them?
It's a great point. I mean, it's a great question. The challenge with F1 is always, right, you can really only compare drivers to their teammates. And when you look at those drivers that you mentioned, so we'll put Oscar and Lando aside for a sec because we've kind of talked about them a bit. Lewis, we don't know really where Lewis is at. Nobody thinks Lewis forgot how to drive. Nobody thinks Lewis is useless. But
except Lewis.
Except Lewis, but no one agrees with him. He's obviously taking some time to get used to this new environment and the new car and everything. And George is up against a rookie. So it's sort of tough to make those direct comparisons. I think George has had he's had a career year, honestly. And that's saying something considering he's beat Lewis Hamilton head to head in Lewis's house, right? Like he showed up to Lewis's house and year one, Lewis had him, 2 and 3, George got him back. And was just performing consistently at a better level than Lewis. So I think when you look at where that car's at and some of the results that he's had, it's really impressive what George has been doing this year. I think he's really become a really solid all-round driver. Obviously, Leclerc's still a guy that's so good over a lap. And whether it's him, whether it's the car, whether it's the team, it's just hard to convert those on Sundays for whatever reason. It's a combination of things. I do still think he gets a bit emotional in the race car. To his detriment. Like you heard in Hungary when things were going south, the way he just sounds aggravated. He sounds agitated in the car, and that's not a good position to be in, right? It wouldn't have changed his result there, but there are other examples of it where like I compare to, we talk about how Oscar is this kind of stone cold, lives right in the middle kind of guy in the car. You think back to Lando, Hungary last year. He ends up in the lead of the race because of whatever, and they want to give it back to Oscar. And he's having a very calm discussion about it on the radio. Hey, we need you to switch back. Well, tell him to catch me. You're like, well, I would have undercut him anyway. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't cursing. Even when he was getting royally fucked, he stayed very calm. And so I do think that's an area that Charles could benefit from working on a little bit. Because I don't think he's not a guy that drives faster when he's angry. A guy like Alonso, I think a guy like Alonso does drive faster when he's angry. I think he's one of those dudes. So he's like, you kind of piss him, like get him stung by a bee before he gets in the car and he'll probably do a little better. I think when he's kind of comfortable and complacent, he's not the Fernando Alonso that we know. So it's some of those ones are tough, but I definitely think that George is we're seeing like peak George right now.
What do you make of we've had a bunch of rookies this year in F1, and they've all kind of had their moments this year, it feels like. It seems like every rookie, for the most part, even it seemed like Lawson, who was kind of like a half rookie, he's now started to catch up with Hadjar, but Behrman's had his moments. Bortoleto just had a great result. Kimi got pole. Where do you kind of like, what are your takeaways looking at this first year for these, 5 or 6 of them?
It's an impressive crop, I think. It's probably one of the to have as many as we have in F1 this year. It's a really impressive lineup. Again, with Kimi, the Mercedes seemed to be a little bit better earlier in the season. Those performances were there. Miami was great. Montreal was great. As the car seems to have fallen off a little bit. He's had a bit of a gap to George. I'm not worried about it. Like, I think he'll be fine. That experience will come. That speed will come back. I think it's inherently there. Behrman obviously came in with a lot of hype. I think he's done a very reasonable job. He had 4 11th place finishes in a row there going into Hungary, which is such a kick in the nuts, for a guy like that. But the Haas has not been consistently the top of the midfield, but on its good days, I think, again, on his good days, on the car's good days, I think he is a little bit faster than Esteban right now, which is, again, saying
Saturday,
something.
he's dead even with him.
Right. And if the car was a little more sorted, I think it would probably tip more into Ollie's favor, to be honest. And as he gets more experience, I think he will kind of surpass Ocon in that sense. Bortoleto's been super impressive because that car is not great. And even when it's good for a Sauber, it's still not great. And Nico's known as one of the best Saturday guys. Like, that was kind of one of his things. And I think Gabby may even have, I think he's beating him right now. I think it's like 8-6.
Yeah.
So that's really impressive. Really, really impressive. And again, he does that on Saturday, but then he backs it up on Sunday. Like, he qualified up there in Austria, stayed there, had a great race in Hungary. So he's been super impressive as well. And what I like about him is he's just a kid who came from nothing, and he really just had to work hard and like really put in the effort to get there. He had to win to keep going, and he did. And I think that's those stories are cool. And then Hadjar's kind of a tough one because he's been so impressive. He has scored so many points. But again, the number one thing you compare drivers to in F1 is their teammate, and he's kind of had an interesting situation there. Lawson came in after the Red Bull debacle, whatever, and has taken some time to get up to pace. That car has also been pretty consistent, right? Like we talked about that earlier in terms of the relative speed of that car and the drivability and the developments they've brought, the upgrades they've brought. It's never really taken a backward step. So in the same tone where we're saying every time the car gets worse, the gap kind of separates between teammates. He hasn't really had a bad car, and he doesn't have an experienced teammate to really judge against. So it's kind of tough. Like, I would love to see what Max does.
You can't pick all of them. You can't love all of them.
No. I will
weighing
say
all the options.
I will say the most impressive at this point, as of Hungary, I would say is probably Bortoleto. Just because he's up against it.
So I make you in charge of Cadillac. You have to pick a rookie. You're picking him?
Of the ones currently, of the 4 that are out there now? Is it 4?
Who are you drafting?
5, yeah.
5. Yeah, probably.
I have another question, Hinch. Speaking of being a rookie, being 18, when you were an 18-year-old race car driver, do you think you could have handled F1?
No chance. Absolutely not.
What were you doing when you were 18 as a race car driver?
I was racing a series called, what was I doing 18? 18 I was in, it's called Pro Mazda. So like it's like that, it's called, got a different name now, but that equivalent series still exists. It's kind of like 2 down from IndyCar. And yeah, you're racing, and then in between the sessions, you're like on your scooter with your buddies ripping up the mountain beside the track, just goofing off, being an idiot. Like, I couldn't imagine having to do all the sponsor commitments and media crap and the engineering debriefs at 18 years old. Like, there's no chance I could have done that.
We have a theory that he was pushed into this seat a little bit. It was a bit premature for him to be not just in F1 but to be at the top team. That it's
Antonelli?
that there's a little bit of a risk of he is this, the hype could not be higher, and you're kind of setting him up maybe a little bit for some failure if you got him against George Russell. And then like next year, yeah, he'll be 19, but will the narrative be like, wow, he just got whooped by George Russell 2 years in a row? Like when will that kind of maybe start to have a negative effect on him?
You've got to remember that this wasn't the plan, right? He is there a year too early because Lewis wouldn't take a 1-year contract. So Toto didn't want to put him in.
Take a 1-year contract because they wanted to get him in because they were trying to keep the seat warm for him, right?
Correct. So I get it. Like I get why Lewis said no, but this was never the plan, right? And he didn't have a great year in F2 last year, and so like it looks worse on paper. But I think as long as Mercedes, if Mercedes really believes in him and believed him in enough to put this amount of resource into him up to this point in his career, because remember these teams, these F1 teams, man, they have so much data, they have so much information on a driver. Even if his result is not the best, they know the real story behind it, and they just know so much more than we do. So
you say that, but they fuck up the picks all the time. They pick the wrong driver all the goddamn time.
That is 100% accurate. That is a very good point. That is a very good point. Look, data can lie. All right, data's not always accurate.
Yeah. That's right.
The weatherman told me it was going to rain today. What does he know?
Yeah. That's right.
So it's a great point, Matt. It is. They do get it wrong sometimes. But there's clearly something they saw in Kimi. And I think because he got there a year too early, you have to tell him, dude, it's cool. You weren't supposed to be here. This is just a pure learning year. There's no expectation other than to learn and get better. It doesn't even matter where you start or where you finish, as long as where you finish is above where you start, right? And they see that progression. And I think you really start judging Kimi next year.
I know that the teammate thing is not as heated in IndyCar, but you came up through the ladder, and I'm sure you had some tough guys that you were compared to in order to progress. I guess the question is Toto Wolff can be as nice as possible, set the bar as low as possible. I don't think he did that when he made a documentary about him for Netflix before the season even started, and has compared him to Max Verstappen. I don't think he's been doing that, but let's say he did all of that right. Let's say he did everything that you said, and he set the bar really low. Just from how important is it for a driver's performance, like to keep their ego somewhat intact? And if you're 18 years old, young James Hinchcliffe, and you're just getting the shit kicked out of you in qualifying every week, and I know that they're telling you, like, look, he's a seasoned vet, but if you've come through the ladder and you're told you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and all of a sudden you just can't catch this guy, I mean, isn't that inevitably going to, like, what does that do to your ego when you just come up, when you're the fastest guy, and then suddenly you're just getting your ass kicked?
The irony is that you're right. I mean, drivers' egos are so fragile, right? And it's such a difficult position to be in. The only person that could really handle that situation is a much older, more mature person. Like, the irony is he's in this position because he's so young, and he's ill-equipped to handle it because he's so young. But again, I think every driver's different. Every person's different. But if he can go to bed at night accepting that as a rookie, I shouldn't be beating George Russell, then it's going to help him get through the year. Every driver that steps up, right, to the top level has to recalibrate their sensors a little bit in terms of, expectations. Because when you're one of the guys coming up, every level of racing, right? Let's say there's 4 steps up to F1 or up to IndyCar. F4, F3, F2, F1, right? In F4, you're one of the guys. There are 3 drivers that are winning every race. Okay? You're one of 3, because at that level, there's, you move up a rank, and you're in F3 now, and there's 3, maybe 4 guys. Some guys came from other championships, whatever. It's the same usually because you're the same age. So you kind of level up, right? Same 3 or 4 guys, but you're in a fight for a podium at the very least every week, and usually a win. Then you go to F2, and if you're on the right team, maybe the first year you learn a bit, but then the second year you're there. You're one of the 3 guys. You're winning races, you're winning sprints, you're winning features, you're getting poles, whatever. And then you get an F1 ride with Haas. That's not the expectation anymore. And it's really hard for an athlete who has gone their entire career up to that point, knowing I'm in the top 3 of every championship I've ever sat in, to know like, you don't even like top 10s are wins. Like you got to recalibrate how your brain works. And the guys that don't do that fast enough, they start going down that spiral a lot sooner than the other ones. So if Kimmy's been kind of coached and helped to understand that, like, look, man, you should not be good. Not good. I'm obviously exaggerating this a little bit, but like the expectation is not for you to go beat George, right? It's not for you to be winning races year one, especially considering he is a year ahead of schedule. If they've done their job in preparing him, hopefully this year is not going to be too hard on him. And because he did have some success early, he knows that when the car's good, he can compete, right? He knows that he out-qualified George Russell on merit in both the sprint and the Grand Prix at Miami, right? Like straight up. So though he's got to latch onto those moments and realize that like, hey, we've got to help the team get the car back to a place where I can do what I know and have already proven I can do.
What was your welcome to the NFL moment?
Oh yeah.
And how did you rebound from it? How did you get over it?
It's a great question. I think that honestly the big one for me is it took a couple races, but my first 500 was kind of that for me. You know, like my first race in IndyCar, I just couldn't believe I was there, man. Like I was just so shocked. I was standing on the grid before the race and I'm looking around. I'm like, I shouldn't be here. This is nuts. This is insane. I was like, I qualified really well, and I was alongside Dario Franchitti, who's a 3-time champion and 4-time champion, 3-time Indy 500 winner. And I'm sat next to this guy on the grid. I was like, I shouldn't be near him. I shouldn't even be here. What is happening? So and then like my second race, I had a top 5 and like things were kind of going well.
Okay.
And then I got to Indy, and there's just so much pressure on Indy. There's so much stress around it. You know, you're practicing for like 10 days and then qualifying is like literally the worst, most stressful 2 days of your life. And we qualified okay. And so like things were kind of going well. And then in the race, I just made like a 100% classic, like stereotypical rookie mistake and stoved it into the wall. And I'm just sitting there and it's like, no, this isn't how it's supposed to happen. Like, where's the reset button on the steering wheel? Like, I know what I did. And it's like, no, man, that's not how it works anymore. Like you've got to perform the entire time, every session, every lap. You cannot make those mistakes or else this is the consequence. And it was, that was like the first race of the year that went really poorly because of just a blatant mistake of mine. And you're like, nah, that sucks.
Right. We discussed that a little bit of kind of like, you know, Kimmy's had this meteoric rise, and it feels like he's a young kid. He's dominated every series he's ever been in, and it's like he's probably experiencing to some degree like real like I can't lift this rock kind of thing. Every rock that has been in front of him, he's been able to be like,
right,
toss it, and now it's just like, oh, it's a fucking boulder. And there's a kind of ego death that comes with that. There's a kind of like, this is what the fairy book, the storybook of what my life is supposed to be, all of a sudden is like changing in front of me, and it feels like you're like losing control. And that's that's a very difficult thing that everyone has to deal with on some level in their life. Everyone has to have that like kind of like ego death moment, but for him, it's happening on the public stage in this like hyper pressurized environment.
And so that's what separates the goods from the greats. Because the greats are the ones that take that like self-hate for not being good enough and turn it into being better. And the weaker guys just spiral out of control and never really rebound. And you see both. You see both pretty often, actually. But that's going to be the defining thing for him is, does he turn this into motivation and improve? Or does it just eat away at him and he never really reaches his full potential?
But it sounds like you didn't have that. You were so shocked to be there. Like you actually didn't have a story like so I'm going to do this, and then I'm definitely going to IndyCar, and then I'm definitely going to be champion. Or what was your storybook that you were telling yourself as a kid?
You know what? I think because of how I got there, my experience was a little bit different. I struggled, man. Like it was so hard to find money to go racing, and you know I was coming up right at like the worst possible time because 2008 happened. And when the global economy tanks, the first thing to go is sponsorship dollars for frivolous marketing expenditures like motorsports programs. And that was right when I was like about to make that jump. And so I just sort of toiled around that the Indy Lights, the F2 equivalent, for a couple years, like longer than you normally would want to. And I didn't get to IndyCar until I was 24. And so I was, quite a bit older and had a lot of heartbreak and like didn't think it was ever going to happen for me. Like I had basically given up because, I dropped out of school and when I was 19, and my school gave me a 5-year deferral on my program. And my parents were like, cool, you've got 5 years to make a living driving race cars. You're going back to school. And at that point, I'm like, year, 2 years top, I'm there. We're good. No problem. That was in 06. So then 08 happens and you're just like hanging on for dear life. I put together a good year in Indy Lights. I got an IndyCar test, nailed the test, was faster than the veteran driver they'd already hired. Everything was great. So they're like, okay, we want to hire you. We don't have a sponsor yet, but we'll figure it out. Cool. Sign a contract. Think, oh my God, I think we maybe did this. We couldn't find a sponsor. And I literally, like, there's a date by which we had to have money in the bank from a sponsor to make the first race. And that date came and went and we had $0. So I went to the first race with my team shirt on and I stood in pit lane watching everybody else race thinking, oh, I'm done. Like, that's it. This isn't going to happen for me. And that was 4 years and 9 months after I had deferred my education. So like that was April. September, I was going back to school. And then that weekend of that first race, we got a call from a sponsor that finally was like, yeah, okay, we're in, let's go. And I debuted the following race, a race late in the season. So I think because I thought it was gone, that every day was just like, I just can't believe we're here. I can't believe we pulled it off.
You're on borrowed time a little bit.
Yeah. What's been the like most standout headline storyline for you guys this year? Like, what have you spent the most time talking about and wondering about?
I mean, I think it's for us. It's the Lando Oscar thing. Given the fact that like there's an inherent like I came in F1. I was like, all right, Lando's my guy. He's young. He's on this team that's like historically good, but they're fighting. So like it gives me some room to run here. And then now and it was like, oh look, he's had this like the car's finally good. He's gonna do it. And then Oscar's come in, and it's this interesting thing because we would try to figure out like why people are like, this season sucks. And we're like, this season's kind of amazing. There's like, these guys are diametrically opposed in terms of personality, in terms of like approach, in terms of even like standing, even like within the team. There's elements of like, Zach Brown has known Lando since he was really young. We feel like, Andrea Stella's maybe leans more to Oscar, that there's chaos happening there. It just feels like people are kind of like annoyed by it or bored by it. And like the camps are very like separate. And we want there to be like, it could be an all-timer if it like allows itself to be. And if people can kind of like fully embrace it, but it feels like people are like reluctant to do that.
It's almost like it's like 2021, but they get along too well. That you don't feel the tension the way you did in like the late 80s, early 90s McLaren or like 2021. But okay, right. So you came in, Lando was your guy. Matt, why did you default to Oscar? Just because Brian went with Lando and you wanted to argue with him every week?
Probably
it's not in there.
It's not in there. I mean, I just like that. I like that he was, in DTS in this world where, like, I got into it with Daniel Ricciardo and Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris and all these charming guys, and I just immediately latched on to this kid who was like the antithesis of all that. Like, I just found it sort of funny and hilarious that like. He didn't emote at all, and
he almost seems out of place compared to the others.
Oscar is hilarious. He's hilarious.
It seems like he'd be better off as an accountant or something. Like he's just like he literally seems like he doesn't belong there. And it's what it is. It's a lot. You get whiplash from like everybody else's radios. It's like, this isn't working. Fuck this. Fuck that. And then. His radio is always just like a great palate cleanser of like, okay, whatever. Like,
and also like the dry humor, like the sarcasm that he drops mid race sometimes is like amazing.
Yeah. So I was really like, I found that like an antidote to all the other stuff, which I love. It's just like, if I'm in the mood for something else, I have him.
Yeah.
Right, he's charming
And,
by like not. He's like so charming by like not being charming. By like not playing the game, there's something like deeply refreshing about Oscar.
For sure. He's just there to race.
it's an anti-charisma.
Right.
But I bet
so-
he's one of those guys. I bet he's one of those guys kind of like Kimi Räikkönen, where he's kind of, at the 2-word answers, kind of monotone, whatever. I know Oscar's not like that. But I bet when you get him out, a couple beers in him, guys will riot.
Yeah, there's
That's my bet.
this clip of Max that has been kind of like almost memed to death of him on the private jet where he's just like he's blowing into like a birthday like blow thing. I don't know what you even call that.
Yeah.
He's just like drinking gin and tonics and he's just like letting loose and like going crazy. And it was really like, we all had those friends who like, yeah, they're really intense. And they worked really hard, and then like you finally got them out one night, and then they just got like wasted, and were just like, tearing off their clothes and jumping off the roof of a building into the pool. Like that's kind of what Max has, and it also feels like a little bit. You want to see Oscar let loose a little bit, and I hope that as the season, I think there's like. It's kind of like in a race, right? When someone's on different strategies, and it's like these are gonna converge, and it's gonna converge in the last few laps. We're almost hoping that this season will kind of bring that out of Oscar and bring that out of Lando, and we can get some fireworks, and this thing can really have the potential to be an all-timer if, like, they let it be one.
I also think his entrance into F1 was just the best. Like,
yes,
like,
yeah. That
like
the tweet will go down.
Every other entrance is like so boring. Every other entrance is so boring. It's like, this guy won F2. Here he is.
Yeah.
He won F3, he won F2, here he is. Or he was our reserve driver. Here he is. Like,
right.
Like
the tweet was legendary. His mom is hilarious.
The whole thing with like he won F3, he won F2. Naturally, he's going to be reserve driver. Oh, and now he's like shooting his way to McLaren, like with the tweet, and like him and Alonso have just completely fucked Alpine. Forcing them to hire Pierre Gasly to race with Esteban Ocon, which was a match made in hell. I mean, the whole thing was incredible.
Yeah,
it was incredible. And I mean, I thought like he came in with such a splash, and talk about like having your storybook kind of turned on its head. Like I was thinking about, is it an advantage to have your sort of narrative kind of upended early, like. He didn't get the drive right away. He had to sit on the bench. Then the team that, he was a junior for, like, was dicking him around. He had to shoot his way out, right? Everybody called him a traitor, questioned his loyalty, right? I mean, he was a bit persona non grata for a while. I mean, these sorts of things. Whereas, like, Lando, he's probably viewed himself as, like, McLaren's number one guy for a while. And now it's like, right, he's probably feeling some kind of rude awakening a little bit. Whereas like Oscar knows, I mean, it's had to learn at a young age, like it's just it's a business.
Yeah. Right. For sure. I like it.
Venkas, we are in the middle of summer break, which means no races, no drama, just me pacing around my apartment like a team principal stressed about which driver I'm going to make the right call for. I'm talking to you, Andrea Stella. The only thing getting me through it, my mug, root beer. Ooh, that sound is so good. Oh, delicious. And this episode is brought to you by Mug Root Beer. Honestly, when was the last time you sat down and had a root beer? That creamy vanilla flavor hits you like a surprise podium for Yuki Tsunoda, which I still think is coming this year. Don't tell me otherwise. We love Mug Root Beer here at the Red Flags podcast. This season's all about who's got that dog in him. Is it Lando Norris? Is it Oscar Piastri? Who is drinking more Mug Root Beer, I think, is going to win this championship, because this brings out that dog in me, and I think that Lando Norris needs a little bit of Mug Root Beer to get that dog in him, so he better be drinking it if he wants to take home this WDC. I love it. It's a classic, just unapologetic, sweet, frothy goodness that makes you want to lean back, loosen the metaphorical race suit, and embrace your inner dog. So next time you're craving something cold, frothy, and packed with unapologetic flavor, crack open a Mug Root Beer. Find it in your local stores or head to mugrootbeer.com/find-mug to get your paws on some. And give them a follow at Mug Root Beer, because whether you're on the podium or just on your couch yelling at Ferrari strategy calls, you got to let that dog out. Where do you think's going to happen, James?
Yeah, who are you pulling for?
What do you think's going to happen? We got 10 races left. They are within striking distance. Lando's within striking distance. That McLaren is looking pretty nifty these days. What do you think this rest of this year will bring?
I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to track, preference. I think there's some tracks that, because they're so close, if there's a track you're naturally just a little bit more comfortable at, that might be enough to be the edge. Like normally Lando's pretty good in low speed stuff, so Monza could theoretically be a Lando track, but then you go to Austin and that might be a Piastri trap. You just don't know. There's so many interesting variables. And then the other big one is, can other teams start getting in the mix, right? Does anybody find enough to start being fighting, getting in between them, I guess, and taking points away? Because right now it's just you're win for win, right? Like one more win for Lando and I think they're tied on points, or it's like a 1 point difference or something. Yeah. So I don't know, man. I like both guys. I respect how they go racing. I love how different they are, yet how similar they make a car, go lap time wise. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be really fun to watch.
Who's going to win?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like being wrong, and I don't know the answer. If I genuinely thought I had a clear, it's not like I'm not protecting them. I don't, they don't care what I think. It's, I genuinely don't know. It could honestly just fall either way.
Well, there's been drama in the IndyCar world as well. Obviously, Newgarden's had a couple moments this year where people, there's been a few disqualifications from the Indy 500. But over on the F1 side of things, which headlines did you read this year and you were like, oh my God? When you read the Christian Horner news, what'd you think?
That's got to be the biggest one, right? I think like a lot of people have said, not that surprised by the timing, but not that surprised that it happened. Was probably something that needed to happen. And, it's I'm sure from the team side, it was hard to look at a guy that had accomplished what he had with, while in charge of the team. But for a lot of different reasons, that time had come to an end. And so it was appropriate that he was out.
What do you attribute the timing to? Because for me and Brian, I was like, we were like, once he survived that initial, once he got through testing and Max won that driver's champion, like he pulled a driver's championship out of his ass, we were like, well, he's safe now. Like they already took the PR hit of him staying and all this sort of publicity around that. They already took they did the investigations, whatever those were worth. But then to pull the plug, like the next year after, like in an off year at the end of a regulation set, going into another regulation set that he's spearheaded the whole thing to sort of switch horses midstream, to put Laurent Rossi in that sort of position, like when they're changing everything up, it doesn't really click for me.
So what does that tell you? That tells you that he didn't actually survive the other thing. Right. And behind the scenes, it's been a power struggle, and there have been moves afoot that as soon as it was physically possible to do it, they pulled the trigger. They could have waited 10 more races and done it in the offseason. They didn't. They didn't for a reason. So as much as it looked like he got away with it, I don't think he did. And I think that was the beginning of the end, to be honest.
It was a slow bleed out as opposed to a kill shot.
He put up a fight, right? Like he didn't want to go, and he tried to just kind of plant his flag, but there were just too many elements ultimately working against him.
What do you think's going to happen to Yuki Tsunoda, James? Is he going to be in IndyCar in 2 years with a Honda?
Dude, that'd be amazing.
One of the Honda teams.
I'd love to see him come race IndyCar. Yeah, I mean that's probably as good a shout as any. I don't know. This stretch has obviously been rough. He's not going to Aston Martin. I can't imagine Hadjar's not going to be in the Red Bull next year. the question is what they do with the Racing Bull. Like, has Lawson done enough? I mean, Lindblad will be one of them. Has Lawson done enough to retain his seat? Do they take Yuki back and just get rid of Lawson? I mean, in all honesty, as weird as it sounds, even though Honda's leaving, the Red Bull family might still be his best chance. So I don't know. I hope he lands somewhere, because I hope he just goes back to Racing Bulls, because it'd be a shame to lose him. And there's, he's got a big fan base. He does a good job. And this whole year has been so, not indicative of him as a driver,
It's been horrible.
That's right.
He's got more to give. Let him give it.
That depressing note. Well, we have an interesting situation happening right now, because this year the F1 season is a toss-up, whereas the IndyCar season is a slam dunk. Alex Palou completely dominating. IndyCar has the spec series. This is going to be close to the end, but then Palou comes in and just Verstappen dunks on everybody.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of ruining the whole narrative of IndyCar. Like, we got a little bit of an identity crisis this year, because it's not supposed to be like, oh, we know who's going to win this week. But he's sort of ruined that, man. 8 wins on the season in a 17-race season, and he's, there's still a couple races left. He's already locked up the championship. I don't think since this point system was implemented, anyone has ever locked it up with 2 full weekends to go. So, yeah, very Verstappen-esque in how he's driving, in the results he's getting, and frankly, it's infuriating.
Why is nobody in F1 giving him a look?
Well, he had a look, right? There was actually quite a public fight over his services. And I think, so for those that don't know the story, he had been driving with Chip Ganassi Racing in IndyCar. He then signed with McLaren in a very Oscar Piastri-esque display, signed with McLaren's IndyCar program a full year before his Chip Ganassi contract was done. Ganassi had, first right of refusal, and there was all this contentious stuff of well, you can't go. We have an option on you that we are going to take up. And so there was this kind of whole fight. And it was really, my understanding is really about the fact that, Alex wanted a shot at F1. Zach gave him a couple tests. He did an FP1 in Austin and was doing really well. But this was right after the Oscar thing. And so Oscar was in his rookie year. And turned out that Piastri kid ended up being pretty okay. And so I think Palou saw the writing on the wall that there was no seat available at McLaren for the foreseeable future. And McLaren's IndyCar team, though very good and one of the top teams, is not Chip Ganassi Racing. And so he reneged on the deal with McLaren that was breaking already the contract he had with Ganassi. So they did want him in F1. He was actually very good at his tests. He was good in his FP1, but I think the whole fact that he's still embroiled in a bit of a lawsuit over contracts maybe made him a little bit persona non grata. I don't know.
I see. So just to distill a little bit of what you're saying, when he was ready to go to a maybe not as good IndyCar team if it meant that he had the shot at the F1 seat. And then when he saw that seat is no longer in there because there's, the new Kimi Räikkönen, Iceman cometh, Oscar Piastri's in that seat, he said, you know what, I want to win more IndyCar championships. Let me go to Ganassi Racing. Okay,
right.
So that's worked out well for him.
And that's my interpretation of it. And yes, sure. He made the right call. It looks like he made the right call.
He made the right call with regards to IndyCar. Now, he has then said, I don't know how true this is, but what I read somewhere is that he was kind of like, I don't want to do F1. I want to stay in IndyCar. I want to make my name here. He has a chance to, break Scott Dixon's records and to be maybe the greatest of all time in the IndyCar sphere. But you've been watching him, and we're, we love our IndyCar, but this is an F1 pod, primarily. The question that I have is, his skill. You've seen what he can do. How would he stack up in F1?
Pick a team. Pick a driver. Tell me right now. Tell me a driver that you would replace him with, and I will tell you how he will do in that car against that teammate.
Okay, how would he do in the Carlos Sainz Williams seat against Alex Albon?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a great choice. He would be actually very well matched with Albon because Albon's a very really technical guy. He's really into the details, which is what makes Palou so good. So I think they'd be great teammates. And I think he could be, matching and beating him by year 2, no problem. A year to learn the tires, the cars, the tracks, and he would be besting him probably more often than not by year 2.
But realistically, would you think he would only jump if it was to a team with any sort of upward mobility, like a Mercedes or
it's
even a
really
Red
hard.
Bull?
It's really hard to motivate yourself to get up every Sunday to finish 12th when you have a ride in a championship that's a very high level, very respected championship where you can make millions of dollars and go dominate and win and make, win Indy 500s and, get racing immortality. So it would, I think so. I think it would have to be the right opportunity. I don't know what that is. Going into 2026, nobody knows what that is. So, if there was a year to do it, it's almost like you would do it next year just because obviously that's not an option. But, yeah, I don't think he would leave the position he's in unless it was for a highly competitive kind of top 3 team ride in F1. And no F1 team at that level is going to take a shot on a guy that's never raced an F1 car, right? They're going to hire the established guys, the people they know. So it's just a not super, realistic scenario.
Right. It just feels like he is really kind of, the cream has risen to the top, and it feels like we've seen who is at the top of the IndyCar talent pool, and it feels like Palou is just running away with this thing. I mean, what do you think it gives him that edge? Is it the Ganassi side of it? Is if he was on McLaren, you think he could be pulling this kind of thing off? Like, what? Because he came up with these guys in the F1 world, and he was he had to fight for a drive even to begin with. And now he's come in and he's had this, meteoric rise since getting into IndyCar. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think one of the important things to remember about the entire ladder system, right? And it's true. It's true in North America. I think it's maybe a little more prevalent in Europe, just based on what I've seen and the guys I've talked to. But I guess the easiest way to put it is there are a lot of guys that were standouts in F3 and F2, got to F1 and didn't really deliver. And there were a couple guys that were kind of average in F2, and you put them in an F1 car, and man, that was pretty impressive. Like, let's not forget that Behrman and Antonelli were like bang average in F2 last year. Mm-hmm. Now, they both already had F1 deals done. Thank God for them. You threw Ollie into the Ferrari in Jeddah, and he was incredible, right? The junior categories don't always tell the whole story. And if there's a chance that Palou just was never in the right team at the right time and whatever. But then, when he got to IndyCar, he was signed by one of the lower down teams and immediately was impressive. And you can really tell because all those teams are pretty established. The car's been around for a while. We kind of know what's what. And he was immediately a standout guy. And then for year 2, got taken in by Chip, won his first championship with Chip. That first year, so second year in the series, which is pretty unheard of, and has just continued to get better. And that's been the hard part, right? Like he won in 21, he won in 23, he won in 24, and he just keeps getting a little bit better every year. And in a series where the margins are so small, those little increments end up being big when it comes to results.
It's interesting because when we interviewed him, he talked about being karting teammates with Carlos Sainz. Mm-hmm. So he's like the same age as Carlos Sainz. He's from the same country, but they've had sort of vastly different careers. And it's almost like you could almost do a sliding doors situation where, if he had the sort of Carlos Sainz senior sort of puppet strings.
If his dad was an FIA world champion, who knows?
Yeah, right. That maybe he would be tearing it up in F1 right now, but if he had to take a different route.
If he had Red Bull backing from go-karts and so was always in the best shit moving up, who knows? But that's it. I mean, it's a perfect example of why racing is kind of a dumb sport. Like it's not fair, right? Like the best golfer in the world will play in the PGA, right? Like the best basketball player on earth, someone's going to find them and they will play professional basketball. But the driving, like the best driver on earth may have never raced at a high level, may have never been paid $1 to drive a race car because they never got the opportunity or they were never in the right equipment at the right time to get picked up. The sport is cyclical, right? I mean, there was a time not that long ago in the grand scheme of things when F1 was dying and they were just taking drivers with tens of millions of dollars in government money and chucking them in the car. And this whole best 20 drivers in the world line was just like a complete farce. Now the sport is very healthy and all the drivers there have earned it through various pathways and avenues. But again, the Palou to McLaren thing is a great example. He is talented enough to be on that grid. That team had no seats available. There's only 2 on that team.
Right.
There's only 20 on the whole grid.
Teams. There are other McLaren. Zach's just the only one with his eye on IndyCar. Really.
That's right. Well, okay.
For sure.
Let's discuss. He's risen to the top of the IndyCar, rankings. On the other side, Max Verstappen, even though he's not winning the championship this year, has had a few drives that has reminded everybody that he is still, top dog. As much as it pains me to say Yuki's been struggling in the other Red Bull, even though obviously there must be some type of conspiracy there. Let's say you put Alex Palou in that second Red Bull seat, a seat that they have been plagued with. How do you think he does in the second Red Bull opposite Max Verstappen?
That's a tough one because there's a lot of very talented guys that have not managed to compete against Max. The one thing I think is becoming clearer, though, is it seems that more often than not, there is a slight difference in like the upgrade schedule between the 2 Red Bull cars. And it's something that Checo sort of talked about, but a lot of people didn't give a lot of credence to. And like Yuki, they rushed that floor for him in Hungary, and he qualified the closest, I think, time-wise that he has to Max all year. Unfortunately for him, the relative pace of the team wasn't very good. But when he had the same spec everything, all of a sudden he was a little bit closer. So I think the situation over there is so complicated and so dynamic, and that's not obviously to take anything away from Max. I think everybody knows and understands what Max is doing right now and what he's capable of. But the second seat, I don't think is an apples to apples comparison, if I'm honest.
I'm curious. I want to end on this a little bit. Fox just made a big kind of, show of confidence in IndyCar. They are now part owners, correct?
Correct.
Of the IndyCar series, and they own a piece of the speedway as well.
Yep, correct.
And you're obviously working with them. What do you feel like, their presence has done this year? What do you feel like their, presence in the sport has done this year, and what it's going to do in terms of, raising IndyCar's profile? Because it feels like it's been a pretty good first year.
It's been huge. Having 3 different Super Bowl commercials was massive, and I think really just kind of kicked the season off strong. They know how to promote, they know how to market, and they had a vested interest when it was just their property. But now that they actually have ownership in it, it's a completely different story, and it just means they see a ton of potential in this product, a ton of potential for growth, and they're willing to be the ones that kind of take on some of that responsibility. And then when you look at it from the IndyCar side, it's pretty well publicized that a lot of suitors have approached Penske Entertainment about either buying the series or partnering in the series or whatever. And Roger Penske has been fairly, blatant about the fact that he had zero interest. He doesn't need anybody's money, right? And he doesn't want to partner just for the sake of, it's just a headache. So the fact that they even considered this shows that IndyCar acknowledges what a strategic partnership this could be. Having a media partner as a partner in the group, Liberty Media company, took over F1, went all right for them. So there is a blueprint for this type of corporation being involved in this type of sports entertainment product. And so I think it just opens a lot of doors and again, shows confidence from both sides that they believe they can really grow this sport.
What do you think IndyCar can learn from F1 and vice versa?
I think IndyCar can really learn a lot from what F1's done on the digital side, right? I mean, they have absolutely overtaken every sports league that I can think of in terms of how they've approached social and how they've really embraced that side of, the digital side of media. IndyCar is trying to be better. I think there's a resource, pinch point there, certainly, but this investment from Fox can maybe help some of that. There's a good blueprint there for that with what F1's done. In terms of what F1 could learn from IndyCar, I think one of the big things that was always an advantage to the IndyCar side is it was a lot more accessible for fans. But when you try to place that onto Formula One, it's tough because F1's gotten so big now, and there are so many demands on the drivers from their teams and partners and whatever, making them any more accessible to general fans that's a tough thing to do on a race weekend. I think things like the fan zone that they do is a really good way to at least let people physically see these guys in person, even if it's from a bit of a distance, because otherwise paddock's tough to get into. And so your chance of actually seeing one of these human beings in the flesh is pretty rare.
We did a show with, a preview show in Miami with Gunter. Mm-hmm. Gunter had like an ex-NFL lineman, like with like a fucking bulletproof vest.
Yeah.
Like, get the fuck out of the way. Like, this is Gunter's, because there were hordes of people just like trying to get a piece of the Stein, man.
Yeah.
So,
so imagine what it's like for Gunter, Lando and Charles. And exactly.
Yeah.
But isn't that part of F1's appeal? Like,
for sure.
Fuck you can't get in.
The exclusivity is a huge part of the appeal there. And so, and honestly, things like Drive to Survive really changed that. I mean, I was blown away. What blew me away about that show was the access that teams and drivers gave them, the honesty that they gave on camera. Like, those guys weren't just towing PR lines, which is usually what happens when a driver's put in front of a camera. And the candid, responses that they got were huge, because it's all about learning who these drivers really are. And I think F1 did a great job with that. I think IndyCar, again, has been a more open product, and people knew a lot more about the drivers. But F1's done a good job in the ways that they can, kind of getting the drivers out there on a personal side.
It's interesting what IndyCar has. They both have something that the other wants, right? Probably, which is like, one has like this climactic race that's going to like do huge. Like, one has the iconic Indy 500. F1 has Monaco, but it's like kind of become this joke.
It's like the worst race of the year.
It's the worst race, exactly. So like they're kind of like they have inverse sort of issues where like one has this championship that everybody cares about, but no like signature race really. I mean, the Brits will tell you it's Silverstone, and Indy 500 has this like Super Bowl of a race, but then this championship narrative that people care less about. And I'm wondering how you can kind of
what's easier to
fix? Is it like just what's easier to fix? And I just don't know.
So for me, when you look at what the 500 is and you look at what Monaco is, the thing that sets them apart, and it's kind of why Silverstone's in the same conversation, it's history, right? When you're trying to create a hallmark event, you can't, it's the only thing you can't buy, right? You could build a shiny new $1 billion track. You can, do whatever. You can hire whatever bands to come play and whatever DJs to do the grid. But ultimately, in year one, no one really cares. In year 10, people don't really care. By year 30, people are like, it's been around for a while. You hit 50 years, 75 years, that all of a sudden, now you've got an event. And that's what Monaco was. And there was a time when Monaco was an entertaining race, but the sport has outgrown the event from a competition standpoint. Indy, it's going to be hard to outgrow the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Place is pretty big and pretty suited to cars going fast, and so that's not likely to change. And with over 100 years of history, that event's not going anywhere. So I think, without saying that like IndyCar's problem is easier to fix than F1's problem, I think if you just look at those as, nameless problems, it's probably easier to expand on one event and get people slowly interested in a second, and then a third, and then a fifth, and grow that, than it is to try to replicate a big event, because those things just take time. And that's the one thing you can't throw a bunch of money at, or else F1 would have done it. They've got plenty of cash, right? And they think they kind of envisioned Vegas as that in a way, maybe, I think. I don't know if that's going to work long term.
Right.
But that's the thing, is you have to focus on those Silverstones, Monzas, Monacos, the ones that have been there for 50 plus years.
Maybe you got to tweak that track a little bit. Maybe
it's the best chance they have.
We got to tweak the city itself,
or just put them all in F3 cars for that race and let them have at it. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I think elements of like drama. You want that like drama. You want it's interesting, there's been, Newgarden's had this kind of like interesting kind of couple of years here, and, kind of being put into a villain role that he doesn't want to play. We've talked, a few times about how he needs to just kind of like embrace that element of it. That, I think it's interesting talking earlier about Alex, there being kind of a growing resentment. I think as a sport gets big, everyone can kind of be like, we're all in this thing because we're building it. And then like as the dollars go up and as the, this is becoming more real. We're seeing, you can see it with the WNBA right now. It's like,
Yep.
No. Like this shit is like we're playing for keeps, and like we all fucking hate each other. Is how it feels, at least from.
But
the outside.
Ironically, it's maybe do you think ironically the collegial atmosphere of IndyCar is almost like, well, because we're in this thing, we're like the underdogs, we have to like work together, we're building the sport together, like almost the friendships that you guys build, like almost like works against you because you're looking for that McEnroe Borg, you're looking for that Max and Lewis, and like actually if you guys like pulled a little pro wrestling and pretended to fucking hate each other every week, that might actually help.
Part of what the issue is, what we were just talking about with Lando and Oscar, is like they're getting along too well. So like we like sport is this
it's rivalries.
It's this rivalries, it's narratives, and it's this other place where we get to kind of like play out. That's why wrestling is so huge. I've always been like, why did it's fake, it's bullshit, blah blah blah. But it's this like everything turned up to an 11 for a little Spinal Tap reference of like the dynamics of life. This is the this is the bad guy, this is the good guy, there are betrayals, there's this, that, and the other, and you kind of want that and need that. That's almost what I think some of these other sports, it's also maybe a little bit of like a difficulty with motorsport in general when you have like a series, when it's over the course of a season, as opposed to like basketball, hockey, football. There's the playoffs. We're going against each other. It's team against team, or man against man, or woman against woman, and there's like an inherent kind of drama to that. Whereas motorsports, like over the course of the season, actually, in the aggregate, Lando was able to put in more. It's like so.
Yes,
NASCAR tried to solve it right with the playoffs, right? Like they've tried to solve it that way, but I don't know. I'm just rambling.
It's interesting because conflict and rivalries, I think, are super, super important. I think when you look back at like the heights and like the peaks of certain sporting leagues, it's when there are these intense rivalries. But there have to be two parties. One has to be kind of the good one. One kind of has to be the bad one. But it has to be honest. It has to be authentic. You can't fake it. So like, to use the Newgarden example, if that's not what Joseph's into, it's really hard to fake that, and the fans will know it's inauthentic. So, using NASCAR, a guy like Kyle Busch, he was totally fine to be the villain. He didn't give a shit, right? Paul Tracy in IndyCar, he loved it. He leaned into that. Like that was his persona. He loved that. So you have to have someone willing to be the villain, and that villain has to be winning. Right, you can't have a guy that we've got guys that are like, I'll be the villain. It's like, dude, you're 14th in points. That's no one cares. Sorry.
Right.
F1 has Verstappen.
F1 has Verstappen, who again, nicest guy, but he'll lean into that role on the racetrack because he doesn't care what you think about him. Right.
And Alonso as well can kind of will go.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So and IndyCar has Alex Palou, just a very polite,
just the nicest human being ever.
Yeah.
And so what do you do? The other thing too is like when you look at rivalries in like the NFL, like it's always the easiest to use the NFL as an example, right? It's cities, right? And it's city versus city. It's my city versus your city. In F1, you've got kind of countries or a brand that you love, but it's a global sport. So even though guys are from different countries, they can get behind their guy. IndyCar, you've got a global driver base, but a very domestic fan base. So unless it's two Americans going at it, it's hard to kind of generate that because the Spanish guy doesn't have a lot of backing against the dude from Nashville, right? So we're kind of in this weird situation where you either need two Americans duking it out at the top, and one of them needs to be the nice guy, and one of them needs to be the asshole, or we need to make our series more globally appealing and have a fan base that's bigger and create some of that conflict in a different way.
Who can come for Palou? Who's like next year? Like,
so you got, Newgarden's always a threat. McLaughlin's always a threat. He keeps getting better and better as well. So those guys are two easy ones off the top. it's tough to know if Dixon's got it over a full season. Like, he's still fast. He still wins races. He's still super consistent. But Palou just had the edge on him the last couple of years. So then you look at like Pato, he's had a breakout year in terms of his consistency. So if that team can get his performance, him and his team's performance to kind of match Palou, he's racing really well. Andretti, they had, Colton Herta was kind of always the guy. Kyle Kirkwood also came out this year as kind of being the guy. If both of them can just step it up a little bit on the consistency side, they could be it. So again, you go into next year and there's 5-6 guys that if their season starts off well and the team executes, they could be in the fight.
Do you find it hilarious? I definitely find it hilarious. Do you find it hilarious that McLaren's like figured out F1, but IndyCar, they're just, still can't crack it?
It's a different ball game, man. Racing's not easy at any level. It is a tough nut to crack, and every series has its own challenges and is unique in its own ways and requires certain elements. And McLaren's a relatively new team in IndyCar. They've been around for a minute in F1, 200 Grand Prix wins as of last week. So it doesn't come overnight. But it is kind of funny because they just do have access to so much more resource now. And I'm not just talking money. Like, the way the engineering side of a Formula One team works is so far advanced from what an IndyCar team normally does, that the fact they haven't managed to mate that and like get that crossover a little bit more, advantageous for them is kind of surprising, to be honest. But it's also good because it also means that they're not just going to F1 everybody to death and win everything, because no other team here has an F1 team. So if that becomes the standard, the series is gonna crumble. So I'm glad it's not working like that.
Yeah.
Right. All right, James, this was a pleasure. We could talk to you for hours, but are you gonna? We loved seeing you on F1 TV and in Hungary. Are we going to get any more Hinchcliffe on the broadcast?
Yes, sir. Once IndyCar's done, I go to Baku's my next one, and I'll do every one from Baku through the end of the year.
Hell,
nice.
Yes.
Are you guys going to be at any races?
We'll be
Austin,
both the U.S. ones. Yeah,
perfect.
Maybe
Austin
Mexico, but probably just Austin, Vegas. Yeah,
dude, Mexico, if you can do it, it's the best. It's such a good race.
We will see.
Will anyone even be in attendance if Checo's not there?
Yeah, they will. Not as many, but they'll be there.
But he'll be there next year because it's looking like he's getting that Cadillac seat.
Fingers crossed, man.
All signs are pointing there.
Fingers crossed. Well, we'll see you guys in Mexico. Or no, sorry, Austin.
Austin.
Perfect.
Hell yeah.
Can you honor us with a goodbye, Vankas, James?
Always, boys. Goodbye, Vankas!
Yes, goodbye, Vankas!
Goodbye, Vankas.